evening and welcome to VI Voices. It's September 10th, 2012. And as you know, we had here a campaign, or have here a campaign called Rock Your Voice, as we try to get as many people to come out and exercise their rights to vote. But this is an important election come 2012. And we're starting off our series as we have each senatorial candidate come on the show so you get a feel of who they are and what they're about. Those who are incumbents as well as those who are vying for a seat. And this is our chance to get a feel for who they are and determine at the end of this series whom you're going to vote for. And tonight, as we'll start off, as we do every night, we will start with our hot topics. And our first hot topic is the results from the primary election that occurred this past Saturday on September the 8th. What are your thoughts, Mr. Ferris?
The winds of change are blowing in the Virgin Islands.
You think so?
If you look at the St. Thomas district, they have four candidates, four incumbents who stated that they're not going to be running. And now in the primary, you have an incumbent in the name of Patrick Simeon Sproul, who was not placed back in by the people on the Democratic ballot. Wow. So you're going to see at least 5 new senators in the St. Thomas district.
Well, in his defense, he's like 22 votes behind of the number 7 person, and there are some absentee ballots out there and some paper ballots. But what I would say, though, I think the paper ballots and the absentee ballots are somewhat in the same amount. So if the paper ballot people who voted are voting the way that those who voted in the machines have voted, then he may have some problems.
Yes, he may. But it also gives you a great indicator that, he may, even though he gets in, based on the paper ballots and absentee ballots, he may not survive the general.
Oh, of course.
Yes. He may not survive.
Absolutely.
So he must be worried right now. I think the people have spoken thus far in the primary, and I'm welcoming a new change in the St. Thomas district.
Well, jumping over this incredible, I realized the voter turnout was very low, which is not unusual for primaries compared to...
No, but it was even lower than when, I think it's because there were no senators on St. Croix.
Correct.
Right.
For a senatorial primary.
Right.
So people were just like, okay, whatever.
Correct. And they had 4 polls, 4 polling areas. Then usually you have a lot of fanfare at the polls. I think it was rather limited. Personally, I said I was not going to vote for the primary. I passed by Ricardo Richards because they were going to pick something up by my children, and my conscience got the better of me, so I went in and I voted.
I'm glad you did the right thing.
I went in and I voted, but my problem was the primary.
Have Rock Your Voice campaign and you will vote.
I voted in the general.
I vote in everyone, and everybody should vote in every time there's an election, even if it's an election for who's going to run the tax. You should vote in that election.
I agree totally. I went to Pearl V. Larson to vote, only to find out, okay, this station is closed, everybody's consolidated down to Juanita Garden, which I did my due diligence and I took it out of my busy schedule to do that. But I thought it was interesting with the Senator-at-Large race.
Very interesting.
But let me give you some stats on that one. For the Senator-at-Large, there were Craig Barshinger, who is our current Senator-at-Large, and you had Andrew Rutnick, Ronnie Jones, and Iris Kern. And what is interesting about that specific race is that Senator Barshinger only got 40% of the vote, which means 60% of the people that came out to vote voted against him.
That's right.
That's a serious referendum on you coming in now to the to the general election come November. If 60% of your own party has voted against you.
Correct, but if you take a look at it, I think there's only one person challenging him for that seat. So, as I said, he has a 40% chance.
Well, the other big race was the delegates race between Delegate Christensen and Attorney Plaskett. And as you know, you were here on the show when we discussed the issues regarding both of them, and they were down and they had their debates, which I think for the first time in a really long time, the delegate had some strong competition and had to up her game in campaigning, because remember, the last election, she didn't even have a primary.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think that this really allowed her to push a little harder to get those votes. She was successful. Again, she got 57% of the vote, and Stacey Plaskett got 42% of the vote. My only concern is for an incumbent against a relative novice to the political scheme. That's not wide enough of a margin in your own party.
Yeah, but to me, what he says, he sends a message to Stacey and to the Democratic Party that there's definitely, she has something that the people are looking for, so she can try it in the next 2 years. Number two, in terms of succession planning for the Democratic Party, this is a candidate that they need to look at if they want to build their party and they want to re-energize their party. This candidate, in terms of Stacey Plaskett, may be a person that they would like to be there in the next few years after Delegate Christensen leaves her post.
I completely agree with that.
And I echo those sentiments, except that there was this position taken that she needed to wait her turn. But I think that she did the right thing to jump in this time around. So by the next time come around, she'll be well known and she will have a pretty good chance of...
I agree with you. I'm not in that wait your turn thing.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, then you do it.
Thank you.
And nobody should tell you when you should run. But, you know, it is what it is.
And that's it. I'm tired of people telling us we need to know our place. No, correct. There's no right for her.
But she stood her ground.
She stood her ground and she fought a good fight.
Now, boy, you had an opportunity to actually see them at the debates. What were your thoughts on both of them as they debated each other?
The both of them were good, but I think not taking anything away from Stacey Plaskett, I think she ran an excellent race, and I think she is very qualified to do so. But she was just, her comments on her platform was just based on what she knows. She's not in there. She's not a delegate, and the delegate knows better. So I think, and it shows by the polls that the delegate does have the better chance of winning. Just being the incumbent.
You said something that's important because it's been a big issue, and that was an issue of the campaign as to I've been there and you haven't.
Pretty much.
So somehow, if you're there, you will be a better person. Now, I will tell you right now, I don't subscribe to that because I know plenty of people right now in our regular Senate that don't need to be there.
I'm not saying better than you. I'm just saying she's in a position. The delegates in a position because she knows. The other one is just based on her intent. She does not know.
What about answering up the questions, though?
The answer to the question, it was the same thing. She was just basing her answers just based on what she thinks, not what she knows. The delegate was going based on what she knows. She's been there 16 years. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm just saying based on how I see it. I see the delegate as in a better position.
Well, there is something, and they talked about that as well. There's something to be said about having some seniority on your ability to people who know who you are and get into doors that you probably would not get into immediately.
So she know the game. She know the rules. She know who to go to. She know how to get things done. So.
But if you think about it, Attorney Plaskett really exposed the delegate. She really showed, when compared to the delegates of other territories, how the kind of thing that those delegates brought home to their people, and how
we're not getting.
And we're not getting. And I think she really, Attorney Plaskett really set the bar, saying these are the benchmarks we need now to set for our delegate to make sure we're getting what we pay for. And I think that's the best way I can articulate that point.
Well, now the delegate has won the primary, and she will be going up against, as I understand, Mr. Holland Redfield, who won the Republican primary, which, well, let me come back. Let me not say that, but won the Republican primary. Norma Picard Samuel, who I think will be run as an independent. Warren Mosler, who will run as an independent. I believe Jeffrey Moorhead is running again this year. I'm not quite sure, but should be going up at least against 3 other people.
Correct.
And we have got to really look at all of them to see whom we want to send back there. And if people follow the argument of who is there, then it's clear that Delegate Christensen is going to be the winner. If we follow the theory that if you've been there longer, you kind of know the rules a little bit better, let's try and send you to do that.
Well, additionally too, you have to be in a party. It seems to me you can't expect to go up there to Congress and stand for nothing. I mean, it's going to count, I think.
I mean, it's good to have a party, but the only problem I have with that is nobody paying me any attention in Congress. So we could have been all the parties that they have, but nobody's paying us any attention, really.
And that's the problem. We haven't been paid any attention. Things are still the same in the Virgin Islands.
But to her credit, come on, the Congresswoman has fostered some good relationships on our behalf. I mean, we've had persons from the Department of Interior and other significant persons come into the Virgin Islands to see what could be done to be assist. So I think that those building of relationships is very important, and that's what she's done for us.
I think we all agree on that, though. Yeah. That the relations build, and she has. And I will tell you, I sometimes have to go to DC for work, and it's amazing how many people that live in the DC area absolutely love the delegate.
Correct.
You know, you say you're from the Virgin Islands. Oh, have you seen the delegate? I mean, they love her in the DC area.
Isn't it part of the problem that we don't have a voice and that we don't have a vote? Isn't that more of the problem?
I don't subscribe to that, because let me put it this way. Attorney Plaskett pointed out that the delegate from the Guam, the Pacific Islands, and some of those, and even DC, had gotten things for their people. And this particular delegate, and those delegates are non-voting, similar to our delegate.
Right.
And what has she brought?
I would extract the delegate from DC. Because I think, even though I think she's a wonderful lady and she does work hard, that's the capital. I mean, so she has a little thing behind of her that they'll listen a little bit more to what's going on in the DC area. Surprisingly, that's one of the places that Congress stepped in a couple of years ago and says, okay, you have too much confusion going on, so we're taking you over. And they stepped in, and now they're doing a whole lot better. But I agree when she mentioned the issues regarding Guam and the delegate from the Northern Mariana Islands and all that they were willing to get and what they accomplished for their residents that we weren't able to do. And so,
but again, isn't it more of complacency as it relates to the Virgin Islands and what our needs are, as opposed to the delegate and her inability to get us what Guam?
It may not be complacency. It may be the fact that what she said, how she does it, she finds secured funding of secure businesses and bring it home, and then it's up to the VI government. She has nothing to do with the VI. She doesn't follow up. She just brings or provides, but she doesn't follow up with the funding. Or
yeah, but that's the problem I have, though. I don't think that the delegate, and whoever the delegate will be, can take the approach that I'm getting the money, y'all figure it out from there. I don't get involved with that, because
this is what I'm saying.
It's a tie-in. You have to continue to make sure I'm getting you this. What are you doing?
Right.
But I like what Natalie said, complacency. But complacency on whose behalf? Is it the delegate being complacent or the people being complacent? I think the people are not being complacent. The people have been asking time and time again for certain things from its delegate.
Well, I would say
that's what I am.
But at the same token, the people put the delegate back there for 60 years.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I would say this, though. But she hasn't really
position.
had that much competition in the time that she's been there. I mean,
I think
real people to come. I think Stacey was the first one in a long time.
I think her first race was our biggest competition.
Right.
Her first race was the biggest competition.
At the end of the day, whoever comes has to become really good to overcome the delegate to Congress.
Well, I would say this, Stacey Plaskett said, and clearly we're talking about her, so she has a bright future in the Democratic Party.
Sure.
Correct.
But she said something that I thought was very important. We have so many people from the Virgin Islands and the Caribbean living in the United States. And for the most part, the delegate for the Virgin Islands is really the person that would be most identified with all of those other people who are from other Caribbean islands living in the United States. And maybe what needs to be done is a fostering of, we need to get some stuff done. Okay, I'm going to go to all these states where there are all these people from the Virgin Islands and other Caribbean islands and say, listen, y'all register to vote. I need you to push your congressman, push your senator, because we need to get this done for the territory.
Right.
That's something Stacey said I think is really important, that may or may not be done, and hopefully the delegate will take that into account.
That's a good point, though, because we haven't done much lobbying, and I think it's for the simple reason that we don't have that vote. But if you notice that other constituents in other jurisdictions, they do a lot of lobbying. I mean, I've lobbied on the Hill, for example, equal pay for women and all of those things, but with other states.
I mean, here's a point. You have Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. They're a territory just like we are, but they get a whole lot of stuff. Why? Because of the Latino vote.
Chicago,
and they want
New
the Latino vote, so the Puerto Ricans, they're everywhere.
Correct.
And they're going to get their people lined up to do what needs to be done, and that's why they get all we have to do. So we need to take that approach as well when we try to lobby for certain things for the Virgin Islands.
And you're right, maybe that's one thing we need to do and look forward. But I go back to, if you take a look at the primary, and the ballot was also party leaders. They were electing party leaders as well. I think one of the biggest bones of contention, what the most disappointing things throughout the past few years is the lackluster nature of the Democratic Party. And I'm going to keep saying, the party needs to focus on rebuilding. And this is a great way to start. It's also about succession planning. You have young leaders on the party ticket. You have young people like Stacey Plaskett that they need to start to build a house, erect and build a house on. And that's
the only problem is that approach of wait your turn wasn't limited to the delegate race. It's all over, and it pervades the Democratic Party. You wait your turn. It's not, and that's the sad part.
Yeah, I did what you said, because I think that has probably discouraged a lot of the younger generation as it involves joining the party because of the appearance of not having a unified front, which is very important in a party. You can't have the in, because at the end of the day, it shows the weakness.
Correct. Well, and I think this is a good time for the party.
St. Thomas, we're on St. Croix, but we do want to make sure that we talk about our sister island, our sister district, St. Thomas, St. John district, and they had a senatorial primary over there. And the results were surprising because they don't kick anybody out, and so they did something Crucian. And I am looking at the results, and Clifford Graham, who was extremely popular in St. Thomas, was the #1 vote getter. Sean Michael Malone came in second, Myron Jackson third, Clarence Payne fourth, Janet Millen Young came in fifth. Donald Duxco from out of nowhere came back, and he's like fifth. And then you have Justin Harrigan Sr., who I don't really know. I'm sorry, Gene Anthony Ford, who I don't really know, seventh. And then Senator Sproul, eighth. And so he has been, if it stays the way it is, and if you look at the traditional, we look at numbers for absentee, kind of mirrors what happens locally. He may not get his seat again. So that's 5 open seats in the St. Thomas, St. John district.
But you're not talking 5 possibly new candidates because Donald Duck Scholes were a senator before.
Some years back.
Right.
So you're talking maybe a former senator getting a seat now,
right,
and whatnot. But I like what I'm seeing. And if you think about it, the people didn't went out and do this. The incumbents move aside and open the door for some change to take place. So what you said earlier, and I think that somewhat balances out. This wasn't the St. Thomas populace or electorate going out and saying, we're going to make a change. The only thing they had to do was to go along with the wave. I'll go with the current, make a change.
Well, I'm still waiting to find out why the 4 decided that they didn't want to run anymore. Hopefully we'll find out one day why that happened. But you know what? This is going to be a very interesting election cycle because, like you said, there are 5 open seats in St. Thomas. We know that there's at least 1 because Senator Richards is not running again. And we have a lot of new people running for offices, some who have been there before, and meaning ran before, and some who have been running continuously and have sat before and now trying to get back in. It will be very interesting to see how that pans out come November.
To me, definitely, because I want to know what the people are looking for. Because for these last 2 years, has been a most difficult year for the people of the Virgin Islands. We have lost events, so we have had the 8% cut. There's been a lot of contraction within the economy and within families. I truly want to know what the people of the Virgin Islands are looking for. Are they looking for sound leadership? Or are they just looking for more of the same? More of the rah-rah and more of the kinfolk and the cronyism to take place within the Virgin Islands? Are they really saying it's time that we start to put issues in front of family relationships?
Well, tonight, as we started this series, we'll be doing three senatorial candidates per night. And tonight we have, of course, senatorial aspirant Diane Capehart with us tonight. And we also have Senator Neville James. Kenneth Gittins was supposed to be on the show tonight, and I confirmed, but tonight I understand we got a message that he was not going to be able to be here tonight. So I'm sure we'll have to figure out how you all will get to see who he is. But we have Ms. Capehart and we have Senator James with us tonight. And those are some things we got to ask them so we can see. Because my thing is, I'm not replacing people just to put people in. I want to know what you're coming to the table with, especially when we're in a situation that we're in right now with our government. Also, as we come up to the back end of our hot topics, we will be talking about a bill that is coming through the legislature, bill number 29-431. And all government workers, if you work for the legislative branch or the executive branch, you want to stay for that because it is a doozy. And I for the life of me, cannot figure out why anybody in their good conscience and right mind would even want to bring such a bill, but we'll talk about that coming up in the back hot topics area.
I know, as you mentioned earlier, we have the incumbent, Senator Neville James, the Democrat, and we also have Diane Capehart, who is a female Democrat that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, came 8th.
And she did extremely well the last time. Extremely well the last time.
And what I wanted to point out is that the women in the territory are the largest voting bloc, and it still continues to be that way.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you?
And Natalie is championing their cause.
Hey, I sigh.
Yeah. Well, when we'll be back, we'll have with us Ms. Capehart, and she'll be here to let us know who she is and what she plans to do. Back in a moment. Good evening and welcome back here to VI Voices. And we have with us Miss Diane Capehart, a candidate for the the 30th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. Good evening, Miss Capehart.
Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be here tonight and to give the audience a little bit of who you are and what are your hopes for the 30th Legislature, other than to win it, but what are your hopes when you're there?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. I'd like to take this opportunity to say hi to the panel also. Natalie and I went to St. Mary's School together, so thank you for plugging me earlier. My name is Diane Capehart. I am a senatorial Democratic candidate for the 30th Legislature. This is my third time running, so I'm very positive that I'll get in this time after my hard work. I'm a mother of 3. I was born here in St. Croix. I presently work at DPNR in environmental protection. I've been working there for the past 12 years. Before that, I worked for Department of Health as a Medicaid supervisor, supervising the Christiansted and Frederiksted Clinic. I'm no stranger to doing volunteer work. I presently volunteer for the Virgin Islands Resource Conservation Development Council as the president, managing a $2.7 million NOAA grant, managing a $500,000 forestry grant. I'm also a member of the New Horizons Women Democratic Club. I'm a member of the VINE in Virgin Islands Environmental Educators. Recently, I was the participant and co-sponsor for Relay for Life. So I am no stranger for doing things in a community. The list goes on. So I'm also a local entrepreneur. I have a small business called Dee's Island Potpourri. So I collect flowers, dry flowers, and I create my own potpourris. I participate at the agriculture fair every year, so I believe in entrepreneurship. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I just want to offer my service, my dedication, my honest and hard work, running as a representative in the 30th Legislature. So, after running 3 times, I think I've got this down pat that let's see what tomorrow brings for me.
Well, I know the last time you were almost right in the Senate. And you did an excellent campaign the last time. And what I felt was, what at least for me is important for anybody who's running, is to see who's run before. What have they been doing since the last election to now? So tell the audience a little bit of what you've been doing that would, at least to help the people of the Virgin Islands progress during the interim between the 29th Legislature and the 30th Legislature.
Well, as I said, managing a $2.7 million grant, which is a stimulus grant, which the VIRC&D, what we did was we applied for these grants because, with the stimulus grants coming to the territory, we got 2 grants, and managing those grants has actually taught me a lot about financial responsibility and overseeing this money, and it has been a real challenge for me, and it kind of prepared me. Of course, being the president, I've actually been in this organization for the past 12 years. I've been a member, I've been the vice president, now presently the president. But things have changed so much with Congress having all these cuts. VIRC&D, a nonprofit, is no longer going to be operating after we are finished with this grant, because the feds did all these cuts. So all the RC&Ds throughout the United States received cuts. We got kicked out of USDA. We lost our financial help. Administrative help, technical help. So, just going through that phase and managing a grant and not having a home anymore kind of taught me a lot about fiscal responsibility.
And we're going to need somebody in the Senate who understands fiscal responsibility, because it's apparent that some who are there now don't have or understand fiscal responsibility.
Right.
And so that's going to be a very important issue, at least for me. When I'm looking who I want to vote for, I want to vote for somebody who has compassion, but who also understands fiscal responsibility. But
you know, I was going to add to that though, because you know, women in the Senate right now are the minority and have been for quite some time. So you're getting in maybe a breath of fresh air on the one hand. But what I wanted to ask, since you talked about entrepreneurship earlier, what plans, if any, do you have, especially if you see what's going on the Big Island, businesses closing and, you know, a lot of people out of jobs, etc. What plans, if any, do you have specifically as it relates to entrepreneurship and promoting that specifically for our younger people?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's one thing that is very important on my list. You know, with each time that I've ran, it's like your platform kind of changes based on what's happening in the community. And because after losing one of our biggest private employers here in St. Croix, we have a lot of people who are unemployed. We have people who are uninsured, health insurance wise, and that has become a real homework for me to see how can I be creative. So plans to initiate and support legislation to work on economical sustainable development for cultural, historical, ecological tourism is something that's, I think, very important. We have all these resources. We have great history here. So we need to be creative as legislators, trying to see how we can be creative and bring monies into the territory, just what we have here in our backyard. So that's a big plan of mine. And also, you know, talking about agriculture. Agriculture is also one of my passion, because I've worked closely with USDA, Department of Agriculture, so I understand what resources are available for our farmers. Recently, USDA actually, they're trying to push an initiative called a water quality initiative, which they're encouraging farmers in the territory now to take advantage of what you call EQIP. It's environmental quality incentive program, and this helps with farmers to help them with crops. It helps them with best management practices, you know, all kinds of different things with nutrients, soil nutrients. So there are so many resources out there that we can start working on production, crop production, marketing, exportation. So agriculture is definitely one way that we need to start looking in, instead of always importing, and we need to start exporting.
Well, the farmers are going to love you.
Oh yeah, I've established a good rapport with a lot of them. When they come to me and they say, Capehart, we don't have anything, you need to do something for the farmers. I'm like, the resources are there. There are so much money. And I know this because I know that the cost share that the EQIP program has, a lot of farmers can't even meet that cost share. So because I have managing a grants program in environmental protection, I don't send federal funds back. I always keep my monies here, make sure I do something creative. So I know programs like EQIP, where I've pooled $30,000 of my monies with Department of Agriculture, so farmers could have a pool of money to come and say, well, I want to have meet my cost share, so they could come to Department of Agriculture, and then they sign up with them, they meet the cost share, they go back to Department of USDA and say, I have my cost share money, so monies can't go back to the feds. So there's so many resources out there for our farmers.
What's the ratio for the cost share though?
It depends on what practice you want to do. You know, you have farmers that deal with livestock. You have farmers that deal with planting, produce. So it depends on how much monies that you apply for.
Ms. Capehart, all this said is good, but how do we move those things that are rather idealistic in terms of the cultural tourism and the agriculture? How do we move that from just being potential to actually being things that we are actually doing in the Virgin Islands in a year or two?
Well, you know, recently I'm getting myself familiar with organizations like Succeed. They are on the bandwagon trying to see how they can be creative. so they can utilize what resources we have here to bring income into the territory, create jobs. So working with organizations like with them, working with EDA, small business, all the resources that we have here in the territory, working closely with these agencies is, I think, the first step that I would want to work with.
Now, I have a pet peeve. Like, for instance, we have so much potential, but we keep doing things the same over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We keep giving money to the same organization that keep doing the same thing, the same year. We keep talking about changing our tourism product, but the Department of Tourism is still focusing on one aspect of tourism, which is for St. Croix, let's start to focus on bringing in the cruise ship, but we're not putting any capital into developing our infrastructure. Working with the non-profits like St. Croix Landmark Society, St. George's Botanical Garden, and putting some money into those organizations so they can also develop their infrastructure. How do we actually start to really manage our system and really start to really make the Virgin Islands shine and get that money back into our shores, then instead of our money leaving and going to Orlando, Puerto Rico, North Carolina, all over the place?
Thanks for the landmarks plug. But go ahead.
Well, you know, it goes right back to trying to, I guess, work with the Department of Tourism, actually trying to show them the importance of what you've been doing in the past is not working. We need to create a new plan. Let's do something different. And showing them that, you know, tourism is definitely one of the things that we really need to start working on. And hotel development, definitely. We don't need all 5-star hotels. We need to start thinking about, you know, probably small bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
We need to probably think about all-inclusive hotels. You know, not always 5 stars are the answers.
Or maybe we crawl before we walk.
Exactly. You got to creep before you walk.
Let me ask you this, because I think that people are going to want to know this. And it may be, well, there's no way for us to really know the answer other than to take you at your word. When you get into the legislature as Senator Capehart, how can we be assured that Senator Capehart is going to do what is in the best interest of the people of the Virgin Islands and not succumb to all the others who are in there?
Right.
Now, growing up, I will be very honest with you, growing up, I've seen the Ruby Roses and all these other people who, it didn't matter what you told her, she was not changing her mind if it was something that was not for the benefit of the people of St. Croix. And too often, as of late, we see people going in there and you have high hopes for them, and then you wonder what happened to them when they got in there. How can we be assured that Senator Capehart, Diane Capehart that's sitting right here tonight, will be the same Diane Capehart who will be Senator Capehart fighting for the people of the Virgin Islands?
Okay. Well, if you know me from since the beginning of time, I am who I am. I don't falter. I don't fall back on my word. I am very dedicated. I'm very honest. I'm very compassionate. And if I tell you that I am going to work hard for you, I am going to do that. If I see that a task is something that I cannot take on, I'm going to actually let the people know that I made an attempt to do A, B, C for you, and I was not able to accomplish this. I think I would keep the people abreast of what is going on. And I think that's what senators who encounter challenges and opposition, this is what they need to do. Let the people know that you're working on their behalf, but you have obstacles and you need to let the people know. And that's what I shall do. If I encounter any obstacles, that I shall let you know. This is one thing that I'm trying to work on your behalf, and I can't accomplish it because.
Excellent. And I hear transparency and all of that.
Transparency,
which is, I think,
accountability.
And how do we know that you're not going to get caught up in the backdoor little, you know, groups and facets and factions, and, you know, that you're going to stay the course and stay focused and committed? Because, you know, sometimes after we get in there, things change, you get influenced, and, well, you know, peer pressure. I mean, we've all been through that. How do you stay the course?
Well, you know, so also, let me do it this way. For anyone who has not been in the Senate, I mean, let's just be sure that we, in defense of them, you don't know what you're going to see when you get there. We know what's here, and on the periphery because we're not in there. And so you don't really know when you get there. It might be a complete, well, not it might be. It will be a complete disaster.
Yeah.
I'm certain when you get there. And so what I hope that you will do is that you will come back to VI Voices once you're Senator Capehart and talk to us about what you intend to do that you're there and what's going on and what your plans are. And so my producer is telling us we're wrapping up. So I'll give you some time. See, actually 15 minutes go by rather quickly.
Gosh.
I'll give you some time to let the audience know where they can find you, where they can look up for your platform information.
Okay. Well, just want to say thank you again, and I will return if you invite me, of course. I do possess the knowledge, the compassion, and the hard work ethics to actually work on your behalf as your senator for the 30th legislature. I ask for your vote, your support this November 6th. You can contact me at dtchart@yahoo.com. Phone number is 340-277-8320.
Thank you, Ms. Capehart, and good luck to you as you seek office in the 30th legislature.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We'll be back in a moment with Senator James. Good evening and welcome back. We have with us now Senator Neville James, who is currently a member of the 29th Legislature and seeking re-election to the 30th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. Good evening, Senator James.
Good evening, Council. How are you?
I'm well, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be here tonight. As you know, we are running a campaign here to get people out to vote, and part of that process is to ensure that people get to know who are the individuals seeking their vote for the 30th Legislature. Tell the audience why they should vote to re-elect you to the 30th Legislature of the Virgin Islands.
That's a loaded question.
Absolutely, but I'm going to give you some time.
Well, first of all, I want to thank VI Voices for having me. Glad to see that young Virgin Islands like yourself, young Crucians specifically, are allowing an opportunity for people to see who wants to step forward and be given the consent of the governor. This is my 4th term, so I'm seeking re-election to a 5th term. 8 years ago, when I first stepped up in a non-gubernatorial area like this, a midterm cycle, clearly there was the anti-incumbent sentiment that we're feeling right now, and you know, that's a byproduct of 2 things. Number one, the economy is not well. We're shaking and turbulent. You can use every adjective to describe how badly off we are, but more importantly, the opportunity to vent real frustration is always there in an election year. And when you don't have a gubernatorial election that pretty much grabs the focus in a gubernatorial year, the focus is on the senators. Unfortunately, and I'm saying this, I'm very seriously, unfortunately we didn't have a primary.
Right.
Because we didn't, the opportunity to vet those who want to be elected, that was lost for whatever reasons. Fortunately, we didn't have a primary because economically the dollar isn't there to run the campaign. So you have to look at it from 2 different perspectives as to why I believe I should be re-elected. I think the arguments that I've been making over the last 8 years have come to fruition. I noticed, when we come on the camera, I start yanking. I could talk a local twang here.
You can speak exactly however you want to speak.
But the things that we have ignored for so long are watching us smacking our face right now. I was listening earlier to the conversation with candidate Capehart. We asked about agriculture. It's absolutely mind-boggling in this economy that with the fertile land that we have here on St. Croix and legislation that was enacted in 2006, Act 6836, the Sustainable Agriculture Act, that was asking of the administration, the executive branch, to refocus on agriculture, has been ignored. Just about every tenant in that particular piece of legislation. For some reason, we don't embrace agriculture. And I find it hard to believe that you as a jurisdiction can want to sustain yourself by continuously importing food, number one. And on another hand, harvesting food locally is always more healthy. So they're just the obvious things that the administration, for some reason, just don't want to embrace. Of course, we know this administration is big on borrowing, and that's been a concern of mine because We keep asking for fiscal responsibility. At the same time, we're approaching our borrowing ceiling. Where do we go from here? How long are we going to
Let me ask you this question. Do you think that the 29th legislature has done what it needed to do to stave off or preclude the kind of economic recession that we are in?
The answer is no.
And if it is no, then why should the people seek to re-elect you?
Because the legislature felt inclined, the majority felt inclined to be guided by the executive branch. We have a problem in the institution where senators placate to the executive branch and are not confident in their own ability to drive policies. They feel inclined to be guided by the executive branch. Of course, it's no secret that this senator has zero relationship with the chief executive, but be that as it may, I still have a responsibility to bring legislation forward to address our economic dilemmas, and not only that, to provide a vision going forward for the people of the Virgin
And let the
Islands.
audience know, what then was your contribution to get us out of this recession? I know that the legislature passed the VISA, which is the Virgin Islands Economic Stability Act of 2011.
Act 7261.
Right, and we'll be talking about that at the end of something about that later. But I know they passed that where they took away 8% from the legislative branch employees as well as the executive branch employees. And there's no secret that I was one of the lawyers representing the teachers that took the government to court for that. What was your contribution to, instead of doing that, what did you offer? In other words, we always hear minority senators say, well, they did that, I didn't vote for it. And for me, that ain't enough. You didn't vote for it, but then what did you put forth?
And I agree, it shouldn't be enough. We offered an alternative amendment that would have reduced the unclassified workforce from what we believe at 1,800 employees is way too much. We wanted to implement 150 employees per quarter to bring it down to somewhere around 1,000 employees in the unclassified area because we believe there's too much pork on the unclassified side. That's one. But two, more importantly, with respect to the 8%. The 8% argument was, if we don't do this, we're not going to have money at the end of fiscal year 2011. In other words, if the 8% reflected a $17 million savings over the last quarter, why was it at the end of the fiscal year we had a lot more than $17 million in our coffers? So what I'm saying today to you and to your voice is that the 8% for fiscal year 2011 was not necessary. Or, I gotta speak properly, was unnecessary. And they did that trying to portray being fiscally responsible and staving off unemployment. But the truth is, the monies were there, they overreacted, and frankly speaking, in the 11-member majority, they lacked the financial cohesion and acumen to really determine whether or not the 8% was necessary.
Right, and at that point, with that said, what about accountability to the people in terms of restatement now of their salaries? Where do we go from here?
Well, the provision in Act 7261 reduced salaries for 8% by 8% for 2 years.
Right.
So they now have to fund it in fiscal year 2013, which is the last quarter of the fiscal year. Right. So the tenets of 7261 go back in sunset. That's the right word. Sunset in July of next year. So now they got to fund that. But when you fund it for 90 days in fiscal year 2013, now you got to look at funding it for a whole year in 2014, 2015 going forward. Of course, prior to Act 7261, Provenza was still in play. Right. Provenza is now not in place, so that affects us on 3 different levels: individual income, gross receipts, as well as property taxes because people are leaving the territory, people are selling, excise taxes because people aren't here, they're not moving commodities back and forth. So there are a number of things that we have to look at.
Now, Senator, you've been there for 8 years, and one of the things that you have been a voice, many say, for the Crucian people. I contend that a strong Synchroid means a strong Virgin Islands. And but however, you are not just a Synchroid senator, you are a Virgin Islands senator. Given that you're given 2 more years, what sort of legislation do you see moving that will benefit the whole territory to make sure that the days that are presently enduring won't be too much longer?
At this juncture, any candidate who tells you that they have legislation that will fix our problem, they're out to lunch. Frankly speaking, we have legislation on the books right now that they're ignoring.
They mean who?
the executive branch. You know, we pass legislation.
Then how do
it
you...
is their responsibility to carry it out.
Yeah.
How we do that?
How do you make sure that the executive branch does what it's supposed to do?
Particularly with zero relationship with the executive branch.
Any 10 members of the legislature could run the Virgin Islands. If they want to run it, they have the collective will and the political will to want to do so. The problem with the legislature, and I've been there for 8 years, starts with organization. If you have 7 members from St. Thomas, St. John, 7 from St. Croix, and a large senator, you have 15 senators, and you form a majority where all 7 from one district are included in that majority, then the other district is at an automatic disadvantage.
But would you support then the petition to Congress, since we don't have our constitution, the petition to Congress to revert back to the structure we had before, where you had district senators from each district, and you had 4 at-large senators who were the checks and balance senators for those who were there? Would you support something like that? It's a restructuring of how we work our legislature.
That is part of election reform, but you're still not guaranteed the kind of representation you're looking for. You see, the issue really is the voters stepping forward and demanding of us a high level of representation. And let me get back to organizing. You can't have a majority that the ratio of representation is lopsided from one district to the other. I could live with 6-5. I could hardly live with 7-4. And that's what we deal with.
But here's the problem I'm having though. I, for the life of me, cannot understand how in a legislature where you have the majority of the people are Democrats, a non-Democrat is going to lead your majority. I can't figure it out. And so that in and of itself speaks to me to be a problem. But I disagree with you to the point of our restructuring to have at-large senators, because at this point you are correct. If there's a 7-member majority and all of them are on one island, I can't vote for them. I can't remove them. I live on St. Croix. I have no option to choose to vote for them. With the at-large senator, and I'm not talking about the one we have now, because they seem to think that, I'm talking about a large position where wherever you live, anybody can run for that office.
Well, that's a conditional law. The condition being that he lives in St. John.
Right,
that's not
which I don't agree with. Because I think that's 8 senators in the St. Thomas, St. John district as opposed to 7 in St. Croix. But to have it where you have a large, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever number you want to put it, where they're responsible to check what's going on with those district senators to make sure that they're not doing things they shouldn't be doing. I know it's election reform, but you're in the Senate. That's where you fall in. Isn't it something that you all would think about doing?
We need comprehensive election reform. And comprehensive election reform should not be limited to whether or not we're using a paper ballot versus a machine. Comprehensive election reform should be focusing on representation. Your concern is an argument based on lack of representation, number one, and the ability to impact those who are affecting you. I'm a district senator, but I'm a member of a state body. The legislature is a state body. But be that as it may, we have a problem where we have an 8-week campaign window. Now is when people who are practically unknown are making an argument for election, and that is their right. And for all I know, they might be the best senators we have. You got to educate yourself, number one, and you go hold us to a higher standard. And the rah-rah, I heard you guys speaking before, but the rah-rah can only last but for so long. And the rah-rah hasn't
because the rah-rah keeps running. And so we need to figure out, and I'm glad you said that, because one of my concerns that I'm going to ask every sitting senator that actually comes to the show is, there's the belief that you have a colleague among you who doesn't belong there because the Revised Organic Act disallows that person from sitting. But yet, mom's the word at the legislature. Nobody whether you say, yes, the person can stay, or no, the person can't stay, say something. I know you necessarily may not have control of that because you're not the president of the legislature, but why is it in a position that nobody seems to want to take on that issue?
I submitted a drafting request to put in place legislation that speaks to the argument of crimes involving moral turpitude. I was preempted by the senator in question. So in effect, the senator is pretty much incriminating herself by having authorship to the legislature from back in November of last year and not making it available to a committee or the committee as a whole.
But when do we, as a legislature, start to respect the wishes of the people? Because that institution that's called preemption basically goes against the will of the people, because that ever so often preemption is used either to stop or to disguise the inaction or the unwillingness of the legislature to deal with an issue.
I'm not making excuses for preemption, but preemption exists in every jurisdiction under the American flag. Having said that, your original question is, when are we going to respect the wishes of the people?
Correct.
And my response to the voters are, this is why you have a chance to vote. This is why the vote is so important. And this is why you must exercise that right to vote every 2 years, and don't assume that the residents of other residents of territory are going to make the right decision.
Okay.
It's that straightforward. No, senators are in the business of sugarcoating and wanting to overanalyze a lot of things that are very straightforward in front of us.
And I know that you have tried to push through some legislation and you've been blocked, being in the minority caucus more often than not. Do you have any strategy in place that, if you're re-elected, that would allow you to be more effective in your fight for the people of St. Croix?
I want to be a majority senator. Every senator should run to want to be in the majority, because you get to drive the agenda from the majority. I could be in the minority for my whole career and use this lame excuse. Well, I was in the minority, so I didn't have a chance. To me, that's weak. So you still got to find ways to work within the system and get your legislation forward. My legislative record will speak to that. In this particular legislation, I am proud of one piece of legislation. Given our economic hardship, I don't believe that appropriating funds should really be the focus. I think we should have been focusing more on policy to get us out of this quagmire. On the education side, I move legislation that I believe will allow for our students to produce at a higher level, get us in line with the U.S. mainland, since many of our children, when they graduate, they go to the mainland. Their focus really should be getting them out of school in that first semester in December, so that when they get back in January, just like when they go to college, they start the second semester. We had to override the governor to get that into law. And these are the type of things that we're dealing with. So, I'm comfortable with representing on behalf of the people. They will exercise their inalienable right to vote in November, and hopefully they re-elect Neville James.
Well, we're out of time, but what I want you to do is let the audience know where they can find you, where they can actually look up your platform. As I see here, you brought something for us, and it's very detailed. But we didn't have enough time to get into everything, but I want you to let them know where they can find you if they want to look this up. And again, what information you need to know.
I work at the legislature offices in Frederickstead. I'm not a new candidate, I'm an incumbent. 773-2424 is the main number. 712-2279 is our office numbers. My personal email, njames3033@yahoo.com. Step by the office, get a copy of that particular platform, which speaks to 8 years, and we're also putting together the platform that will speak to 2011 and 2012.
And I take it you're satisfied with number 20 on the ballot?
20. The vision is 2020. Yes, let's push number 20.
There you go. But I'm going to exercise something quick, because I need to ask this question, and it's in regards to bill number 29-431, which is a bill that's in the legislature currently, and has been already going to the Finance Committee for this Thursday, the 13th, and then to the Rules Committee on the 14th, which is basically designed to preclude or stop any effort by any government employee in the legislative and executive branches from seeking reimbursement of their money from their 8% taken away from them. This seems to try to look ahead at what the court may do in finding that the legislation should not have occurred, and to preclude these people from getting their money back. And it was sent down by the governor, and Senator Ronald Russell, is the one pushing this to go forward. What's going to be your stance on this issue when you go to those hearings?
I voted against Act 7261, so I'll be consistent, and I will be voting against that piece of legislation. It's that simple. And of course, the goal now would be to identify the funds because we're looking at like $34 million for those 2 years. So
wow.
We'll see how it works.
All right.
Thank
well,
you.
Senator
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and I wish you much luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
You got it.
All right.
Take it, Natalie.
We'll be back in a moment. Good evening and welcome back. We had an action-packed show today. We had Miss Diane Capehart, who is running for a senatorial race, as well as Senator Neville James. But I want to make sure that we all know that Miss Capehart, Diane Capehart, her number is number 9 on the ballot. Please be sure that you remember that. Diane Capehart's number is number 9 on the ballot. So we're here for our final hot topic, and at least a precursor. We're going to talk about this again tomorrow, which is Bill number 29431, and you heard me mention that with Senator James, which really is a bill designed to disallow the government employees who were subject to 8% cut from being able to get their money reimbursed to them if the court finds that the law was improper.
Right.
In addition to that, it also goes further to say that whatever you were making in 2011 before the 8% cut, if you're under CBA, that's where your baseline will begin for negotiation, as opposed to where you should have been had your steps gone through. This legislation is ridiculous. It is crazy.
The CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements, for those of you in the government that's in the various bargaining units, will be severely affected, and it's for the period of July 4th, 2011 up through July 3rd, 2013 to hold your salaries at the 2011 state where you cut off at, basically.
Hey, it's just like it took the people in 8%, and instead of taking, and not just taking the 8%, now you're just busting them a slap afterwards. And that's, to me, what you're really doing to the people.
Their 8% salary reductions are set to expire come June 2013.
Correct.
And so the attempt here is to kind of stop the bleeding, where the monies that would have accrued from 2011 to 2013.
Here's what they're trying to do.
Save.
In fact, about it, you know, I've made no secret that I represented the teachers in this lawsuit against.
Well, do you not agree it's to save, though? That it's
not. No, I mean, it's not saving nothing. They're dead wrong. They know they're wrong. The court, in my opinion, has no choice but to find that they were wrong. And whenever you have a breach of contract claim like the teachers have, if the court finds that there was a breach of contract, you are entitled to get all the money they took from you plus the statutory 4% interest. That's what they're trying to avoid.
Well, this piece of legislation was proposed by your colleague, attorney.
Well, it was sent by the governor, and you're right. Senator Russell took it up, and he's the one pushing it. So he's scheduled to be here on the 24th of
maybe
September.
He has, I'm certain, the justification that goes along with it.
I want to hear what it is.
You know, the working, and you know, it turns out that we're good that we're talking about this, because September is Labor Awareness Month. The working men and women of the territory are the ones that are going to be affected by this piece of legislation.
And the working men and women keep getting the shaft. I believe Senator Russell is going to come to the show and talk about, it's going to be about fiscal responsibility and all of that nonsense.
Well, they're trying to balance the budget now.
He's going to come to the show and he's going to talk about fiscal responsibility and all of that. You should say the people continue to get it. The working men and women of this community continue to get a shot.
But doesn't the working men and the women carry the economy?
My position is, what are the men and working women of the community doing? The senator just been here and he spoke about the people and the people having the power. Who are the people? The basis for community development is improving the people. The people is who need to improve.
But we're going to discuss this some more tomorrow, because we're out of time. We're going to discuss this tomorrow.
Already?
The issue is, how do you improve the people?
Well,
you know, but I hope that the people don't get lackluster and lose hope.
Well, like I said, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Bill 29431 going to be on our show for a while.
Okay.
We'll talk about it for a while. But I want to thank Ms. Capehart. I want to thank Senator James for being on the show tonight. Tomorrow we have some more individuals who will be on the show. We have Terrence Nelson, Samuel Sanis, who will also be on the show, and Troy Mason. So remember, your voice can make a difference. Thank you and good night.
Okay.